The winter storm had driven her to his door, but it was the blood seeping through her worn leather armor that made Jonah Nichols set aside his axe and step back to let her in without a word. She stumbled across the threshold of the small cabin, her green skin pale with cold and blood loss, ice crystals clinging to her dark braided hair. The tusks that curved up from her lower jaw were small but prominent, and her amber eyes held a mixture of desperation and defiance that told him she expected him to slam the door in her face or worse. Most humans would have. The frontier settlements had been at war with the orc clans for 3 generations, and trust between their peoples was as rare as summer snow. But Jonah had seen enough death in his 30 years, enough senseless violence during his time as a soldier, before he had come to this isolated valley, to build a life away from all of that. He was a quiet man by nature, made quieter still by the things he had witnessed, and he had no desire to add another corpse to the tally of his memories. "Sit," he said simply, gesturing to the chair near the hearth where a fire crackled against the howling wind outside. The orc woman looked at him with visible suspicion, her hand moving instinctively to the hilt of a knife at her belt, though the gesture was weak. She was exhausted, that much was clear. Her armor was of decent quality but bore the scars of many battles, and beneath it he could see where an arrow had pierced her side, the shaft broken off but the head still embedded. "I will not harm you," Jonah said, his voice steady and low. He moved slowly toward the hearth, keeping his hands visible. "But that wound needs tending or you will die before morning." She swayed on her feet and pride warred with necessity in her expression. Finally, necessity won. She moved toward the chair, each step careful, and lowered herself into it with a barely suppressed grunt of pain. Jonah gathered his supplies: clean cloth, hot water from the kettle that always hung over his fire, a bottle of strong spirits, and his needle and thread. He had learned field medicine during his years in the military, stitching up comrades in makeshift camps. The skills had proven useful in this isolated life as well. "My name is Jonah," he offered as he approached her. "I am going to need to remove that arrowhead. It will hurt." "Saria," she replied, her voice rough but clear. Her accent carried the guttural undertones of the orcish language, but her command of human speech was excellent. "Saria Pyre. And I know what pain is, human," he nodded, understanding that this was her way of giving permission. He knelt beside the chair and carefully began to unfasten the leather straps of her armor. She tensed, but did not pull away. Her eyes never left his face, watching for any sign of threat or deception. The armor came away to reveal a quilted shirt beneath, soaked with blood on the left side. Jonah reached for his knife to cut away the fabric, moving slowly so she could see what he was doing. The blade was sharp and made quick work of the material, exposing the wound. The arrow had entered just below her ribs, angled upward. Dangerous, but not immediately fatal if he could get the head out without causing more damage. "This will be the worst part," he told her, meeting her amber eyes directly. They were striking against her green skin, bright and intelligent. "I need you to stay as still as possible." Saria gave a single sharp nod. Her jaw was clenched tight, muscles standing out along her neck. She was powerfully built, as all orcs were, with broad shoulders and visible strength even in her weakened state. But there was grace in her features too, a sculptured quality to her face that caught him off guard. Jonah focused on the task at hand. He poured some of the spirits over his tools and his hands, then over the wound itself. Saria hissed, but did not flinch away. He took a deep breath and began to probe the wound, feeling for the arrowhead. His fingers worked carefully, and he could feel her trembling with the effort of staying still. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cold. The arrowhead was lodged against a rib which had likely saved her life by preventing it from going deeper. He worked it loose bit by bit, his movements precise and gentle. When it finally came free, dark blood welled up, and Saria let out a sound that was half gasp, half growl. Her hand shot out and gripped the arm of the chair hard enough that the wood creaked. "Done," Jonah said quietly. "The worst is over." He packed the wound with clean cloth to slow the bleeding, then threaded his needle. The stitching took time, each pass of the needle through her flesh eliciting a slight twitch, but she made no other sound. He found himself admiring her stoicism even as he concentrated on making the sutures neat and tight. When he finally tied off the last stitch and bandaged the wound properly, he sat back on his heels. "You should rest. The bleeding has stopped, but you have lost much blood. You need time to heal." Saria looked down at the bandages, then back at him. "Why?" The single word held a wealth of suspicion and confusion. "Why help me? Your people and mine are enemies." Jonah stood and moved to wash his hands in a basin. "I have had enough of enemies," he said simply. "This is my home, and you came to my door in need. That is all that matters here." She studied him in silence for a long moment, and he felt the weight of that amber gaze. Finally, she spoke again, her voice softer. "The storm caught me in the open. I was tracking a deer when a patrol from your settlement found me. They attacked without warning. I fought free but took the arrow as I ran." Her expression darkened. "They would have killed me for sport." Jonah felt a familiar heaviness settle in his chest. He had seen that kind of cruelty before, the way war reduced people to their worst instincts. "Not all humans are like that," he said, though the words felt inadequate. "And not all orcs are savages," Saria replied, an edge to her tone. "But your people do not seem to care about such distinctions." He could not argue with that. The prejudice ran deep on both sides, fed by generations of conflict and loss. He had come to this isolated valley precisely because he was tired of being part of that cycle. "You can stay here until you are well enough to travel," Jonah said. "The storm will likely last several days regardless." "I have supplies enough for 2. Saria's eyes narrowed. "You trust me. I could kill you in your sleep." "You could try," Jonah acknowledged without heat. "But I do not think you will. You are not here to fight. You are here because you needed shelter, and I am offering it." Something shifted in her expression, a slight relaxation of the tension she carried. "You are a strange human, Jonah Nichols." "Perhaps." He moved to his small kitchen area and began preparing a simple stew from dried meat and vegetables. "But I am the one with the warm cabin and medical supplies, so strange might be useful tonight." That drew an unexpected sound from her, something between a cough and a laugh. "Fair enough." The storm raged through the night, wind howling around the cabin and snow piling against the walls. Jonah gave Saria his bed, a simple frame with a straw mattress and wool blankets, while he made himself a pallet near the fire. She had protested but lacked the strength to argue long, and the blood loss had left her lightheaded and exhausted. He woke several times during the night to tend the fire and check on her. Each time he found her sleeping restlessly, her face drawn with pain even in sleep. The wound was not infected, at least not yet, but healing would take time. By morning the storm had not abated. Jonah went about his usual routines, feeding the fire and preparing a simple breakfast of porridge and dried fruit. He had laid in substantial supplies for the winter, expecting to be snowed in for long periods. His cabin was well built and well stocked, the reward of months of hard labor after he had arrived in the valley 2 years prior. Saria woke when the smell of food reached her. She pushed herself up slowly, wincing, and he saw her assess the room with a warrior's eye, taking in the exits and the weapons: his axe by the door, a hunting bow on the wall, a few knives in easy reach. "How do you feel?" Jonah asked, bringing her a bowl of porridge. "Like I was shot with an arrow," she replied dryly, but she took the bowl and ate with obvious hunger. He settled into the chair by the hearth and ate his own breakfast, comfortable with silence. Saria seemed to appreciate that he did not press her with questions or small talk. They ate together as the storm continued its assault on the world outside. When she had finished, she set the bowl aside and looked at him directly. "I owe you a debt." "You owe me nothing," Jonah said. "I told you this is simply what is right." "Among my people, debts are not dismissed so easily," Saria insisted. Her tusks caught the firelight as she spoke. "You saved my life. That means something." Jonah considered this. "Then perhaps when you are healed, you can repay me by sharing your story." "I have been alone in this valley for 2 years, and I confess I am curious about the world beyond." Saria looked surprised but nodded slowly. "That is a fair trade." The days that followed fell into a rhythm. The storm continued for 3 full days and nights, as Jonah had predicted, leaving them snowed in together. Saria's wound began to heal, though she remained weak and in pain. Jonah kept the bandages clean and checked for signs of infection daily. His touch was always careful and professional, and he noticed that she flinched less as time went on, growing accustomed to his presence. They spoke little at first, but the silence between them was companionable rather than tense. Jonah went about his work carving arrows, mending his tools, preparing meals while Saria rested and slowly regained her strength. Sometimes he would catch her watching him with those striking amber eyes, her expression thoughtful and unreadable. On the 4th day, when the storm finally broke and pale winter sunlight streamed through the cabin's small windows, Saria asked him about his past. "You were a soldier," she said. "It was not a question. I can tell by the way you move, the way you treated my wound. You have seen battle." Jonah paused in his work of sharpening a knife. "Yes, I served in the frontier militia for 8 years. I saw more fighting than I care to remember. Against my people, sometimes." He met her gaze steadily. "Against raiders and bandits and monsters as well, but yes, I fought orcs." "More than once." Saria was quiet for a moment. "Did you kill any of us?" "Yes," he saw no point in lying. "And I saw many of my comrades killed in turn. War is ugly and brutal, and it makes enemies of people who might otherwise have lived in peace." "Why did you leave?" she asked. "Because I grew tired of the killing," Jonah said simply. "Tired of watching young men die for causes that seemed less clear with each passing year. Tired of being told that orcs were monsters who deserved no mercy, when I had seen humans commit atrocities that would shame any creature." He set down the knife and whetstone. "So I took my discharge and came here where I hoped to find some measure of peace. And have you found it?" "Until recently, yes." His lips quirked in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "The valley is beautiful and remote. I have everything I need, and no one tells me who I should hate or fear." Saria absorbed this, her expression serious. "You are not what I expected, Jonah Nichols." "What did you expect?" "Most humans I have encountered have been quick to violence, quick to judgment. They see my green skin and tusks and assume I am a monster. But you looked at my eyes." She said this last part softly, as if the memory still surprised her. "When I came to your door, you looked at my eyes, not my wounds or my weapons or my appearance. You saw me as a person." Jonah felt something shift in his chest, a tightening that was not entirely comfortable. That is all any of us are in the end, people trying to survive and find some measure of happiness. "My clan would not agree," Saria said bitterly. "They believe humans are weak and treacherous, worthy only of conquest or death. When I suggested we might find peace through negotiation, I was called a coward and a traitor." Is that why you were alone in the storm? She nodded slowly. I left the clan 3 months ago. I could no longer support their raids on human settlements, could no longer participate in the cycle of violence. My own mother cursed me as I departed. Pain flickered across her face, deeper than any physical wound. I have been wandering since then, hunting and surviving, trying to find a place where I might belong. That must be lonely, Jonah said quietly. Lonelier than I imagined possible, Saria admitted. But I could not stay. I could not continue to kill humans simply, because I was told they were the enemy. I had seen too many die, had heard their screams and their pleas, and I could no longer pretend they were not people just like me. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of shared experience hanging between them. Outside, the world was blanketed in fresh snow, pristine and peaceful. Inside, two souls who had been cast out by their own kind found an unexpected kinship. You can stay here, Jonah said finally. For as long as you need. The valley is large enough for two, and I could use help with the work when you are healed. I am planning to expand my garden come spring, and there is game to be hunted and wood to be cut. If you wish it, there is a place for you here. Saria stared at him, clearly stunned. You would do that? Allow an orc to live beside you, knowing what others would say if they learned of it? There is no one here to say anything, Jonah pointed out. The nearest settlement is 2 days' ride, and I go there perhaps twice a year to trade. What happens in this valley is our business and no one else's. I would pull my weight, Saria said quickly. I am a skilled hunter and tracker. I know how to work a forge and tan hides. I would not be a burden. I know you would not, Jonah said. I have seen how you carry yourself. You are a warrior and a survivor. Those skills are valuable here. Tears welled in Saria's amber eyes, and she looked away quickly, clearly unused to such emotion. You are the first person in months to offer me kindness without expecting anything in return. I do not know how to repay this. Then do not try, Jonah said gently. Just heal and help me when you can. That is enough. The weeks that followed saw Saria's strength return. The wound healed cleanly, leaving a puckered scar that she regarded with a mixture of pride and annoyance. She began helping with small tasks around the cabin, then gradually took on more as her body mended. Jonah found himself enjoying her company more than he had anticipated. She was intelligent and observant, with a dry sense of humor that emerged once she felt comfortable. They developed routines together. Jonah would wake first and stoke the fire, then Saria would prepare breakfast while he brought in wood and checked his traps. They would eat together, then spend the day on various tasks. She taught him some orcish techniques for preserving meat, and he showed her how he maintained his tools. In the evenings they would sit by the fire, and slowly their conversations deepened. Saria told him about her childhood in the clan, growing up in the harsh mountain territories, where orcs had been driven by human expansion. She described the rigid hierarchy of her people, the constant pressure to prove oneself strong and fierce. She had been a good warrior, she admitted, but she had also questioned things that others accepted without thought. Her mother had been a raid leader, famous for her ferocity, and had never understood her daughter's compassion. Jonah in turn spoke of his own past, the farm where he had grown up before it was destroyed in a raid, the years of anger and grief that had driven him to join the militia, and the slow realization that revenge would never fill the emptiness inside him. He talked about the friends he had lost, the choices that haunted him, and the desperate need for peace that had finally brought him to this valley. Winter deepened around them, and the cabin became a haven from more than just the cold. Inside those log walls, they created a space where human and orc could exist without the weight of history crushing them. It was not without challenges. Sometimes old reflexes would surface Saria reaching for a weapon when Jonah moved too quickly in her peripheral vision, or Jonah tensing when she raised her voice in frustration. But they worked through these moments with patience and understanding. One evening in late winter, Jonah was carving a new handle for his hatchet when Saria suddenly spoke from where she sat mending one of his shirts. "You ever regret it? Leaving your people behind?" He considered the question carefully. "Sometimes I miss certain things. The camaraderie of the militia, the sense of purpose, even the structure. But I do not regret the choice itself. I am more myself here than I ever was there." "I feel the same," Saria said softly, "and yet there is guilt. My clan is still out there, still fighting and dying. Should I not be with them, even if I disagree with their methods?" "You cannot sacrifice your principles for the sake of belonging," Jonah said. "That path only leads to bitterness and self-hatred. You made the right choice, even if it was the hard one. You make it sound simple." "It is not simple at all," Jonah acknowledged. "But it is right. There is a difference." Saria set aside the mending and looked at him across the fire. "How did you become so wise, Jonah Nichols?" "I am not wise," he said with a slight smile. "I am simply tired of being foolish." She laughed at that, a genuine sound that made something warm unfurl in his chest. He had grown used to her presence over the weeks, but this was different. This was not mere companionship or shared survival. This was something deeper, something that both excited and frightened him. He looked up from his carving and found her watching him, and for a moment their eyes met and held. The amber of her gaze seemed to glow in the firelight, and he saw his own confused feelings reflected there. The air between them grew charged with unspoken possibility. Saria looked away first, color rising in her green cheeks. "I should check the snares before dark," she said quickly, standing and reaching for her cloak. "It can wait until morning," Jonah said, but she was already moving toward the door, clearly needing space from whatever had just passed between them. After she left, Jonah sat staring into the fire, his heart beating faster than it should. He had not allowed himself to think of Saria as anything other than a guest, a friend, someone he was helping. But the truth was more complicated. He found himself noticing things about her, the way her braided hair caught the light, the strength in her movements, the sound of her laughter. And more than that, he valued her presence in ways that went beyond mere companionship. She challenged him, interested him, made him feel less alone in ways he had not experienced in years. But she was an orc, and he was human, and the gulf between their peoples was vast and deep. Even if his own prejudices had been worn away by experience and isolation, the world beyond the valley would never accept such a relationship. And more than that, what if his feelings were not returned? What if he was reading too much into moments of connection that meant something entirely different to her? Saria returned an hour later, cold and slightly out of breath. She had clearly been walking, working off whatever emotions had driven her from the cabin. She met his eyes briefly, then moved to warm herself by the fire without speaking. They prepared dinner in silence that was not quite comfortable, both of them hyper-aware of the other's presence. When they finally sat to eat, Saria broke the tension. "I apologize for leaving so abruptly earlier. I needed to think." "You have nothing to apologize for," Jonah said. "This situation is complicated." "Complicated," Saria repeated, tasting the word. "Yes, that is an accurate description." She paused, then continued with obvious effort. "Jonah, I need to say something, and I ask that you let me finish before you respond." He nodded, his stomach tightening with apprehension. "I have been alone for a long time," Saria said slowly. "And before that, I was never truly understood by my own people. I have spent most of my life feeling like I did not quite fit, like I was missing something essential that everyone else seemed to have. But here, with you, I feel different. I feel seen and valued in a way I never have before." She took a deep breath. "And I find myself developing feelings that I know are inappropriate and impossible, but I cannot seem to stop them." Jonah's heart was pounding now. "Saria, please, let me finish," she interrupted. "I know this can go nowhere. I know that you are human and I am orc, and that the world would revile any relationship between us. I know that I am likely a burden you took on out of kindness, and that my feelings are my own problem to manage. I simply needed to speak them aloud once, so they do not fester inside me." She fell silent, her jaw set, her eyes on the fire rather than on him. Jonah saw the vulnerability in her posture, the courage it had taken to speak those words, and his own barriers crumbled. "Look at me," he said softly. Saria turned her head slowly, and he saw uncertainty and fear in her expression. "You are not a burden," Jonah said firmly. "You have never been a burden. And as for your feelings being inappropriate and impossible," he paused, gathering his own courage. "I share them." Her eyes widened. "What?" "I have been trying not to acknowledge it," Jonah admitted. "Trying to convince myself that what I feel is simple friendship or the satisfaction of helping someone in need. But it is more than that. I find myself watching for your smile, listening for your laughter. I value your opinions and your presence. And yes, I find you beautiful, even though I know I should not think of you that way." Saria stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. She paced to the window and back, her movements agitated. "This is madness. Even if we both feel this way, what future could we possibly have? Your people would call you a traitor and worse. My people already consider me an outcast. We would be hunted by both sides." "We are already outcasts," Jonah pointed out, standing as well. "We have already been rejected by our peoples for refusing to hate as we were told to hate. What more can they take from us?" "Our lives," Saria said bluntly. "If anyone learned of this, if either of our peoples discovered that a human and an orc were living together as more than friends, they would kill us both. You know this is true." "Yes," Jonah acknowledged. "It is dangerous. It is forbidden. It goes against everything our peoples believe. But Saria, I am tired of living my life according to other people's hatred and fear. I came to this valley to find peace and to live on my own terms. If that means loving someone I am not supposed to love, then so be it." "Loving," Saria repeated, her voice barely a whisper. "You said loving." Jonah closed the distance between them, stopping just within arm's reach. "Yes, I am falling in love with you, Saria Pyre. I have been fighting it for weeks, but I am done fighting. Life is too short and too hard to deny happiness when it is offered." Tears spilled down her green cheeks. "I am falling in love with you too. I have been since you looked at my eyes instead of my tusks or my wounds. Since you offered me shelter and kindness without expecting anything in return. But I am terrified, Jonah. I am terrified of what this means and what could happen." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. When she did not move, he cupped her face gently in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "I am terrified too, but I would rather face that fear with you than spend the rest of my life alone and safe." Saria let out a shaky breath and leaned into his touch. "You are the bravest man I have ever met." "No," Jonah said softly. "Just one who has finally found something worth being brave for." They stood like that for a long moment, foreheads touching, breathing the same air. Then Saria tilted her head up and kissed him, hesitant and gentle. Jonah responded in kind, his arms going around her, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt complete. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Saria gave a slightly shaky laugh. "Well, that was unexpected, was it?" Jonah asked with a rare smile. "I feel like we have been circling this for weeks." "Perhaps," she admitted, But I never thought you would actually. I am an orc. You are human. This should not work." "And yet here we are," Jonah said, still holding her close. "Perhaps what should be and what is are not always the same thing." They stayed up late that night, talking and occasionally kissing, exploring this new dimension of their relationship with a mixture of joy and trepidation. They were both adults who had seen enough of the world to understand the gravity of what they were undertaking, but they were also two lonely souls who had found connection in the most unlikely of circumstances. When they finally went to bed, Saria did not return to the room that had become hers. Instead, they lay together in Jonah's bed, wrapped in each other's arms, finding comfort and warmth in shared touch. They did not make love that night. Both felt it was too soon, too much to process, but the intimacy of simply holding each other was profound in its own right. The winter gave way slowly to early spring, and with it came changes both welcome and concerning. The snow began to melt, revealing the valley in all its muddy, awakening glory. Jonah and Saria worked together to prepare for the planting season, their partnership now infused with deeper affection. They were careful in public areas, aware that even in this remote location they could not afford to be careless. But in the privacy of the cabin, they allowed themselves to simply be together. Their physical relationship progressed naturally, tenderness giving way to passion as they grew more comfortable with each other. Jonah marveled at Saria's strength and grace, at the way her green skin seemed to glow in the firelight. Saria in turn appreciated Jonah's gentleness and patience, the way he made her feel cherished rather than conquered. Their lovemaking was an extension of the trust they had built, and it deepened their bond further. But spring also brought visitors. Jonah had gone into the forest to check his hunting snares when he heard voices, human voices, multiple men, moving through the trees with the careless noise of those who did not expect opposition. He moved silently closer, using the skills he had learned in the militia, and saw 3 men in the rough clothes of frontier settlers. They carried weapons and had the look of hunters or trappers. "You sure there is someone living up here?" one of them asked. "Old Jacob said he saw smoke from a chimney when he was up hunting last month," another replied. "Figure we should check it out. If there is someone squatting in the valley, they should be paying tribute to the settlement like everyone else." Jonah's jaw tightened. He recognized the attitude, the assumption that anyone in the frontier territories owed fealty to the nearest human settlement, even if that person had claimed unclaimed land and bothered no one. It was exactly the kind of thinking he had come here to escape. He circled back toward the cabin quickly, reaching it just before the 3 men emerged from the tree line. Saria was inside, and he needed to warn her before they saw her. He slipped in the door and found her sharpening a knife. "We have visitors," he said quietly. 3 men from the settlement. They are looking for whoever owns the cabin." Understanding flashed in Saria's eyes. She stood immediately. "I should hide." "The root cellar," Jonah agreed. It was not large, but there was space enough for her to conceal herself if necessary. "I will deal with them." Saria touched his arm briefly, her amber eyes worried. "Be careful." "Always," he said, then watched as she pulled up the trap door to the cellar and descended into the darkness below. He closed it and scattered a rug over it just as someone pounded on the door. Jonah took a breath to steady himself, then opened the door with a neutral expression. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" The 3 men stood on his porch, looking him over with obvious assessment. The one in front, a burly man with a thick beard, nodded curtly. "Afternoon. We are from the settlement down the valley. Name is Marcus Jensen. We heard there might be someone living up here, thought we would check it out." "Jonah Nichols," he replied. "I have been here 2 years. I claimed the valley and built this cabin. Did you now?" Marcus looked around with proprietary interest. Nice spot. Good hunting, I would wager. Good enough, Jonah said non-committally. Was there something specific you needed? Well, thing is, Marcus said, his tone becoming less friendly, this valley is awful close to our settlement. And we have an arrangement anyone living within 3 days' ride pays a share of their harvest and meat in exchange for protection and support. Protection from what? Jonah asked. I am a day's ride at least from your settlement, and I have managed fine on my own. Protection from orc raids, for one, another of the men spoke up, a thin fellow with a nervous energy. They have been getting bolder. Killed 2 families just last month, burned their farms. We have had to increase patrols. Jonah felt cold settle in his gut but kept his expression calm. I am sorry to hear that, but as I said, I have had no trouble. Yet, Marcus said darkly. Look, Nichols, we are not trying to squeeze you, just want to make sure everyone in the territory is contributing their fair share and staying safe. You were military, weren't you? I can tell by the way you carry yourself. I was, Jonah admitted, wondering where this was going. Then you know how important it is to stand together against the orc threat. We could use a man with your skills in the settlement. Decent man like you should not be up here alone anyway. Not safe, not with those green-skinned savages roaming around. I appreciate the concern, Jonah said, his tone cooling, but I am perfectly capable of handling myself, and I prefer my solitude. Marcus's eyes narrowed. That is an odd attitude for a former soldier. Most men want civilization around them, not to live like a hermit in the woods. Most men are not me, Jonah replied evenly. Now, if there is nothing else, I have work to attend to. The third man, who had been silent until now, spoke up. His eyes were sharp and suspicious. You have a lot of supplies here for one man, and I see 2 sets of dishes by your wash basin. Jonah's heart rate increased, but he kept his voice steady. I like to be prepared, and I have not washed up from yesterday yet. Was there a question in there? Just seems odd, the man pressed. You sure you are out here alone? Quite sure, Jonah said, his patience wearing thin. Gentlemen, I have been polite, but I am not interested in your settlement's protection or your tribute system. I am not bothering anyone, and I expect the same courtesy. Now please leave my property. Marcus's expression hardened. You know, Nichols, it is not wise to make enemies out here. You might need friends someday. I will take my chances, Jonah said. Good day. He closed the door firmly and listened as the 3 men moved away, their voices carrying complaints and suspicions. He waited until he was certain they were gone, then lifted the cellar door. Saria emerged, her face tight with worry. They know someone else is here. They suspect, Jonah corrected, but suspicion is not proof. Still, we need to be more careful. If they come back and find you here, they will kill us both, Saria finished. Jonah, perhaps I should leave. My presence puts you in danger. No, he said firmly, taking her hands. We knew there would be risks. We can manage them. Can we? Saria pulled away, pacing the cabin. You heard what they said. Orc raids, families killed. My people are still at war with yours, and that war is coming closer. How long before someone in that settlement decides to launch a retaliatory raid? How long before warriors from my clan pass through this valley? We will deal with each situation as it comes, Jonah said, though his own worry was growing. I will not send you away, Saria. This is your home now as much as mine. She turned to him, tears glistening in her eyes. I love you. And because I love you, I cannot bear the thought of you dying because of me. Jonah crossed to her and pulled her into his arms. And I love you, which is why I will not let fear dictate our choices. Yes, this is dangerous. Yes, we are taking risks that others would call foolish. But I would rather live 1 honest year with you than 100 years of safe lies. Saria buried her face against his shoulder, and he felt her shoulders shake with suppressed emotion. They held each other for a long time, drawing strength from their connection, knowing that the world was closing in but determined to face it together. The weeks that followed were tense. Jonah made a trip to the settlement to trade some furs and gather information. What he learned was not encouraging. The raids Marcus had mentioned were real and brutal. Orc war parties had been striking human settlements with increasing frequency, and the humans had responded with equal violence. Several orc camps had been burned, prisoners executed without trial. The cycle of violence was escalating, and moderate voices on both sides were being drowned out by calls for vengeance. He returned to the cabin heavy-hearted and told Saria what he had learned. She listened in silence, her face drawn. "My clan," she said quietly. "This sounds like their work. They have been pushing for all-out war since I left." "I am sorry," Jonah said, knowing how it hurt her to be estranged from her people even as she rejected their methods. "I made my choice," Saria said, "but I fear that choice will be tested soon. If your people organize a major offensive, they will sweep through these valleys. And if my people do the same, then we will have to be very careful," Jonah finished. "Perhaps it is time to consider leaving the valley altogether, heading further into the wilderness." Saria shook her head. "Running will only delay the inevitable. Sooner or later we will be caught between one side or the other, and Jonah, I will not ask you to give up everything you have built here. You are what matters," he insisted, "not the cabin or the land. You." They debated their options long into the night but reached no clear conclusion. The truth was that their situation was precarious, and growing more so with each passing day. They were two people in love in a world that would not tolerate that love, and there was no easy answer. Spring turned to early summer, and with the warmer weather came more signs of the escalating conflict. Jonah found tracks near the northern edge of the valley, a large party of orcs moving east, likely a raiding force. He and Saria kept to the cabin for several days until he was certain they had passed. Then they found evidence of a human patrol passing to the south, men on horseback armed for war. "We are caught in the middle," Saria observed as they studied the tracks. "It is only a matter of time before one side or the other finds us." "Then we prepare," Jonah said grimly. "I have weapons and I know how to use them, and you are a trained warrior. If we have to fight, we fight. Fight our own peoples." Saria looked at him with anguish. "Jonah, could you truly raise a weapon against humans to defend me?" He met her eyes steadily. "I would defend you against anyone, human, orc, or otherwise. You are my family now." "And I would do the same for you," Saria said softly, "but I pray it does not come to that." Their prayers went unanswered. It was a hot afternoon in midsummer when they heard the sounds of battle approaching. Shouts and screams, the clash of weapons, the panicked cries of people in mortal fear. Jonah and Saria ran to the edge of the tree line and saw a group of human refugees fleeing through the valley, two families with children, pursued by a war party of orcs. Saria made a choked sound of horror. "That is my clan. Those are my people." Jonah saw her torn expression, saw the warrior in her rising alongside the woman who had rejected violence. The refugees would not make it to safety. The orcs were faster and better armed. "What do we do?" Saria asked desperately. Jonah did not hesitate. He grabbed his bow and started running toward the conflict. "We save them." "Jonah, wait!" Saria ran after him, but he was already knocking an arrow. The orc war party was 8 strong, all warriors in full battle gear. They were closing on the fleeing families with clear intent to slaughter. Jonah took aim at the lead orc and released. The arrow flew true, taking the warrior in the shoulder and spinning him around with a roar of pain and surprise. The other orcs turned, searching for the source of the attack. Jonah sent 2 more arrows flying, taking another warrior in the leg. It bought the refugees precious seconds to widen their lead. Then the orcs spotted him, and their roars of rage echoed through the valley. They charged toward him, weapons raised. Jonah stood his ground, still firing, but he knew he could not take them all. Saria burst past him with a war cry of her own, her blade flashing in the sun. She met the charging orcs with the skill of a trained warrior, her movements fluid and deadly. But she was not trying to kill, she was fighting defensively, blocking and parrying, using her knowledge of orc fighting styles to anticipate and counter their attacks. "Stop," she shouted in the guttural orcish tongue. "Stop this madness." One of the orcs pulled up short, recognition dawning in his eyes. "Saria Pyre, you are alive. Stand down, Groth," Saria commanded. "These people are not your enemies. They are humans." Another orc spat. "All humans are enemies. Your mother said you had gone mad, and now I see she was right." "You defend them." "I defend innocent people from slaughter," Saria shot back. "Children, Groth, you would kill children. We are at war," Groth replied, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "War has no room for mercy." "Then war has made us into the monsters humans claim we are," Saria said fiercely. "I will not stand aside while you murder families. You will have to go through me." The orcs exchanged glances, clearly conflicted. Saria was one of their own, daughter of a respected raid leader, and yet here she stood defending humans. Beside her, Jonah had another arrow nocked, ready to support her however necessary. The standoff might have ended in bloodshed, but the refugee families had used the time to flee far into the woods out of reach. The orcs recognized that pursuit was now pointless. "You have betrayed us," one of the orcs said to Saria, his voice heavy with judgment. "Your mother will hear of this. You are no longer one of the Pyre clan." "I stopped being one of the clan when I learned to see humans as people," Saria replied. "Now go. Leave this valley and tell my mother that her daughter chooses honor over hatred." The orcs withdrew slowly, carrying their wounded, their eyes full of anger and confusion. When they were gone, Saria lowered her blade and turned to Jonah. She was trembling, tears streaming down her face. "I just severed my last tie to my people," she whispered. "I am truly alone now." Jonah pulled her into his arms. "You are not alone, you have me, and you did the right thing. You saved innocent lives." "Those families," Saria said, pulling back. "We should make sure they got away safely." They tracked the refugees and found them huddled in a dense thicket, terrified and injured but alive. The humans recoiled when they saw Saria, and several of the men raised makeshift weapons. "Stay back, monster," one of them shouted. "She saved your lives," Jonah said firmly, stepping between them and Saria. "She turned against her own people to protect you." "A trick," a woman said, though her voice shook. "Orcs have no honor." "This one does," Jonah insisted. "I am Jonah Nichols, former militia. I have been living in this valley for 2 years, and I am telling you that this orc woman risked everything to save you. The least you can do is show her basic gratitude." One of the children, a little girl no more than 6 years old, stepped forward. She looked up at Saria with wide eyes, then said in a small voice, "Thank you for saving us." Saria knelt down, tears flowing freely now. "You are welcome, little one. I am sorry you had to be so frightened." "Why did you help us?" the girl's father asked, his tone still wary but less hostile. "You are an orc. We are your enemies." "You are people," Saria said simply. "And I am tired of killing and hatred. I chose to help because it was right, not because of what you are." The refugees exchanged glances. Finally, the father nodded slowly. "Then you have our thanks. And our apologies for our initial reaction." Jonah and Saria helped the families reach the path that would take them safely to the settlement, providing them with water and what supplies they could spare. As they parted ways, the little girl ran back and pressed a small carved wooden figure into Saria's hand, a crude horse that she had clearly made herself. "So you remember me," the child said. Saria clutched the figure, her voice thick with emotion. "I will treasure this always." When the refugees were gone, Jonah and Saria returned to the cabin in silence. The afternoon's events had shaken them both. Saria had publicly turned against her clan, and Jonah had revealed their presence in the valley. There would be consequences. "They will come for us now," Saria said as they entered the cabin. "Both sides. The humans will not trust an orc living here no matter what I did, and my clan will send warriors to punish me for my betrayal." "Then we leave," Jonah said. "Tonight. We pack what we can carry and head into the deep wilderness, far from any settlement or clan territory." "And how long can we run?" Saria asked. "How many times can we start over before we are caught?" "As many times as it takes," Jonah said stubbornly. "I will not give you up. I will not give us up." Saria looked at him, her amber eyes full of love and sorrow. "You are the best man I have ever known, but I fear we are fighting a battle we cannot win." "Perhaps," Jonah acknowledged, "but I would rather fight and lose than never fight at all." They spent the evening preparing to leave, packing supplies and making the cabin as secure as possible in case they ever returned. It was painful to abandon the home Jonah had built, but staying meant almost certain death or capture. They were finishing their preparations when they heard horses approaching. Many horses. Jonah looked out the window and felt his stomach drop. At least 20 armed men rode into the clearing around the cabin, their faces grim. He recognized Marcus Jensen at their head. "It is the settlement," he told Saria. "A large group." Saria joined him at the window and cursed softly in her own language. "They are here for me." "We can fight," Jonah said, though he knew it was hopeless against such numbers. "And die pointlessly." Saria shook her head. "No. I will not let you throw your life away." Before he could stop her, she opened the door and walked out to face the armed men, her hands raised and empty of weapons. Jonah ran after her, positioning himself between Saria and the riders. "Stand down. She is under my protection." Marcus Jensen urged his horse forward. "Nichols, we heard what happened, heard you have been harboring an orc here." His eyes were hard. "We should have known something was wrong when we visited before." "She saved those families," Jonah said urgently. "She turned against her own people to protect them. Surely that counts for something." "It counts for nothing," another rider spat. "She is an orc. They are all the same killers and savages." "I am neither," Saria said quietly but firmly. "I am simply someone who is trying to find a better way than endless war. A better way is for all your kind to be driven back into the wastes where you belong," Marcus said. "We cannot have an orc living this close to the settlement. It is not safe." "Then we will leave," Jonah said. "We were preparing to do so anyway. Just let us go in peace." "It is not that simple," Marcus replied. "The families you saved told us what happened, told us there are orc war parties in these valleys. We are mobilizing a major offensive to drive them out permanently. And we cannot have any orcs left behind who might provide intelligence to their clan." "She has rejected her clan," Jonah protested. "They consider her a traitor." "So she claims," Marcus said. "But how do we know this is not some elaborate ruse? How do we know she has not been spying on us all this time, gathering information?" "Because she is not a spy or a liar," Jonah said heatedly. "I know her. I trust her with my life." "Then you are a fool," Marcus said flatly. "We are taking her into custody. She will be held until after the offensive is complete. If what you say is true, she will be released after. If not," he shrugged. "Well, we will see." "You mean you will execute her," Jonah said, his voice hard. "Do not pretend otherwise." She is an enemy combatant in time of war, Marcus said. We are being generous by not killing her on the spot. Jonah felt Saria's hand on his arm. It is all right, she said softly. It is not all right, Jonah replied fiercely. I will not let them take you. You do not have a choice, Marcus said. And Nichols, if you are smart, you will step aside and let us do what needs to be done. Otherwise, we will have to consider you a collaborator. The threat was clear. Jonah looked around at the armed men, all of them watching him with varying degrees of hostility. He knew he could not fight them all, knew that resistance would only end with both him and Saria dead, but he also knew he could not simply let her be taken. I am coming with her, he said. If you take her into custody, I insist on being held as well as a witness to her treatment. Marcus looked surprised, then annoyed. Do not be an idiot. You are human. You are one of us. I am one of her, Jonah said, looking at Saria. She is my family. Where she goes, I go. Jonah, no, Saria protested. Do not do this. Do not throw away your safety for me. It is not safety if you are not beside me, Jonah said simply. Marcus stared at them both, then shook his head in disgust. You are both fools. Fine. We will take you both. Maybe a few days in custody will knock some sense into you, Nichols. They were bound and placed on horses, then led away from the valley toward the settlement. Jonah looked back once at the cabin he had built, the home he had created, and wondered if he would ever see it again. The settlement's jail was a rough affair, more of a sturdy storage building with bars on the windows than a proper prison. Jonah and Saria were locked in together, at least, which was a small mercy. They sat together on the single bench, hands bound, and tried to make sense of their situation. I am sorry, Saria said quietly. This is my fault. I should have left when I first recovered from the arrow wound, should never have stayed and put you in this position. Stop, Jonah said firmly. You did nothing wrong, neither of us did. We fell in love, which is only wrong because small-minded people say it is. Love does not matter if we are both dead, Saria pointed out. Love always matters, Jonah countered. It is the only thing that does. They were held for 2 days while the settlement prepared for their offensive against the orc territories. During that time, a few people came to see the orc woman who had saved the refugee families. Some were curious. Some were hostile, but a few were thoughtful. The little girl whose life Saria had saved came with her parents on the 2nd day. She pressed her face to the bars and said, My father says you might be hurt. Are you all right? Saria smiled despite the situation. I am well, little one. Thank you for your concern. Father says you are good, even though you are an orc, the girl continued. He says we judged you wrongly. The father, standing behind his daughter, nodded slowly. My wife and I have been talking to the other families you saved. We have been speaking to the council, telling them you could have let us die but chose to risk everything to save us. Some are listening. And some are not, Jonah guessed. The war party leaves tomorrow, the father confirmed. Marcus Jensen is leading it. He wants, the man hesitated, glancing at his daughter. He wants to make an example before they go, to motivate the men. Saria closed her eyes. They are going to execute me publicly. We are trying to stop it, the father said urgently. There are those on the council who believe you deserve a chance, but Jensen has a lot of support and people are frightened and angry. Thank you for trying, Jonah said. It means more than you know. After they left, Jonah and Saria sat in silence. The prospect of execution hung over them like a blade, and they both knew that their time might be measured in hours. If it comes to that, Saria said carefully, I want you to know that I do not regret any of this. Not meeting you, not falling in love with you, not staying in the valley. You gave me the happiest months of my life, Jonah Nichols. This is not over yet, Jonah said, though his voice lacked conviction. Perhaps not, Saria agreed. "But in case it is, I needed to say it." That night, as they lay together on the rough floor of the jail, holding each other as best they could with bound hands, Jonah made a decision. He would not let Saria die alone. If they were to be executed, he would demand to share her fate. Better to die together than live without her. But the execution never came. In the early hours of the morning, before dawn, the jail door burst open. But it was not an executioner who entered, it was a group of orcs, moving with swift violence. They cut down the guard before he could raise an alarm, then approached the cell. Jonah tensed, pulling Saria behind him instinctively, but she gasped in recognition. Groth, the orc warrior from the valley, stood before them, his expression unreadable. "Saria Pyre, we need to talk." "How did you find us?" Saria asked. "We have been tracking the human forces," Groth replied. "When we learned they had captured you, some of us argued for a rescue mission. Your mother forbade it, saying you were a traitor. But others remembered your skill and your honor, even if they did not understand your choices." "So you came anyway," Saria said slowly. "5 of us," Groth confirmed. "The rest are keeping watch. We can get you out of here, but we need to move quickly." His eyes flicked to Jonah with barely concealed hostility. "Just you, Saria, not the human." "Then I am not going," Saria said immediately. "Do not be foolish," Groth said urgently. "They will kill you come morning, you know this." "And I will not leave Jonah to die alone," Saria replied firmly. "He comes with us or I stay." Groth's jaw worked in frustration. "He is human, an enemy. We cannot." "He is the man I love," Saria interrupted. "And if you cannot accept that, then we have nothing further to discuss." The other orcs who had entered with Groth muttered among themselves. One of them, a female warrior with elaborate tattoos, spoke up. "Your mother will be furious if she learns we rescued you only to have you run off with a human." "My mother already considers me dead to her," Saria said. "This changes nothing except that I will be alive and free." Groth stared at her for a long moment, then sighed explosively. "You always were stubborn. Fine. We take the human too, but if he betrays us, I will kill him myself." "He will not betray you," Saria promised. They were freed from the cell and their bonds cut. Groth handed Saria her confiscated weapons, and they slipped out of the jail into the pre-dawn darkness. The settlement was quiet, most people still asleep. The orc rescue party moved with practiced efficiency, avoiding patrols and keeping to the shadows. They reached the edge of the settlement without incident, where horses waited. Jonah found himself mounted behind one of the orc warriors, acutely aware of the tension and mistrust radiating from the creature. They rode hard into the wilderness, putting distance between themselves and the settlement before the alarm could be raised. By midday, they reached an orc encampment hidden deep in a forested valley. Saria and Jonah were brought before a group of orc leaders, and Jonah found himself the subject of intense scrutiny and open hostility. "This is the human?" one of the leaders asked, a massive orc with scars covering half his face. "The one Saria claims to love." "I am Jonah Nichols," he said, keeping his voice steady despite his fear. "And yes, I love Saria Pyre." The scarred orc snorted. "Humans do not love orcs. This is some trick." "It is no trick," Saria said firmly, stepping beside Jonah. "And I will thank you to speak to him with respect, Thorgrim. He has done nothing to earn your contempt except exist as a different species." "He is the enemy," another orc said. "His people are preparing to attack our territories. For all we know, he is a spy." "If I were a spy, I would have done a poor job of it by getting captured and imprisoned," Jonah pointed out. That drew a few reluctant chuckles from the assembled orcs. "The point is," Saria said, "Jonah is not your enemy. He left his own people years ago because he was tired of the war. He has shown me nothing but kindness and respect. and he was willing to die beside me rather than abandon me to execution. If that is not proof of his character, I do not know what would be." Thorgrim studied them both. "You created quite a stir, Saria Pyre. Word of your actions in the valley has spread. Some call you a traitor. Others say you showed true honor by protecting the helpless. The clans are divided on what your rescue means." "I did not ask to be rescued," Saria said, "and I do not intend to return to the clans. Jonah and I plan to leave to find a place far from both our peoples where we can live in peace." "That is a fool's dream," Thorgrim said. "There is no place beyond the reach of this war." "Then we will make one," Jonah said, "or die trying." The orc leader looked at him with something that might have been respect. "You have courage, human. I will grant you that. But courage alone will not protect you from the forces arrayed against you." "We know the risks," Saria said, "but we would rather face them together than live apart in safety." Groth stepped forward. "I think they should be allowed to go. Saria saved human lives at great cost to herself. She has earned the right to choose her own path, even if we do not understand it." There was debate among the orc leaders, voices raised in argument. Finally, Thorgrim raised a hand for silence. "Very well. Saria Pyre, you are free to go. We will provide you and your human with supplies and horses. But understand this: by choosing him, you forever separate yourself from the clans. You will not be welcomed in our territories, and we will not come to your aid if you are in danger. Do you accept these terms?" "I do," Saria said without hesitation. "And you, human," Thorgrim turned to Jonah, "do you understand what you are taking on? You will be hunted by your own kind for loving an orc. You will be denied by hers for being what you are. Your life will be one of constant danger and hardship." "I understand," Jonah said, "and I accept it. Saria is worth any cost." Thorgrim shook his head in what might have been amazement or disbelief. "Then go, both of you, and may whatever gods you pray to watch over you, for you will need their protection." They were given supplies, weapons, and 2 sturdy horses. As they prepared to leave the camp, Groth approached them one final time. "I still do not understand this," he admitted to Saria. "But I saw you fight to protect those humans, saw you risk everything for what you believed was right. That is the Saria I remember from when we trained together as younglings. Whatever path you walk now, I hope you find happiness on it." "Thank you, Groth," Saria said, embracing him briefly. "That means more than you know." They rode out of the camp as the sun reached its zenith, heading north into wild territory that belonged to neither human nor orc. Behind them, 2 worlds that would have kept them apart. Before them, uncertainty and danger, but also freedom and the possibility of building something new. They traveled for many days, moving deeper into the wilderness than either had ventured before. They saw no signs of settlement or clan territory, only endless forest and mountain. They hunted for food, made camp each night, and slowly began to relax as the distance grew between them and the war. One evening, as they sat by their campfire beneath a canopy of stars, Saria leaned against Jonah's shoulder. "Do you think we will ever truly be safe?" "I do not know," Jonah admitted. "But I think we have a chance, and that is more than we had before. I am sorry you had to give up your cabin, your valley. I know you loved it there." "I loved the peace I found there," Jonah corrected. "But the true peace came from you, not the place. We can build another cabin, find another valley. What matters is that we are together." Saria tilted her head up to look at him, her amber eyes reflecting the firelight. "How did I get so lucky as to find you?" "I think we found each other," Jonah said, kissing her forehead. "And yes, I think we are both very lucky." They continued their journey for several more weeks, until they found a place that felt right, a hidden valley with a clear stream, good hunting, and land that could be farmed. It was remote and isolated, accessible only through narrow mountain passes that would give them warning of any approach. "This could work," Saria said as they surveyed the valley from a high ridge. "We could build a home here." "Then that is what we will do," Jonah agreed. They set to work immediately, using skills they had both learned in their previous lives. Jonah's carpentry and Saria's strength made quick work of felling trees and preparing timber. They designed a cabin larger than Jonah's previous home, with room to grow and spaces for both of them to pursue their crafts. As the cabin took shape, so did their future. They worked side by side each day, their partnership deepening with shared labor and shared dreams. In the evenings, they would sit together and plan a garden here, a smokehouse there, perhaps a workshop for Saria to work the forge she hoped to build. It was hard work, but it was joyful in a way that neither had experienced before. They were building something together, creating a life from nothing but determination and love. One evening, as the cabin's walls stood complete and they worked on the roof, Jonah set down his hammer and called for Saria's attention. "I want to ask you something," he said, his tone serious enough that she stopped her work and looked at him with concern. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," Jonah assured her. "In fact, everything is more right than I ever dared hope." He took a breath, suddenly nervous in a way that battle had never made him. "Saria Pyre, among my people, when two people wish to commit their lives to each other, they perform a ceremony called marriage. It is a public declaration of love and commitment." Saria's eyes widened. "I know of this custom. Orcs have something similar, though we call it a life bonding." "Well, we have no public to declare to," Jonah said with a slight smile. "And no priest or shaman to perform a ceremony. But I wanted to ask anyway, in the presence of this valley and the sky and whatever is listening, will you marry me? Will you bond your life to mine, formally and completely?" Tears spilled down Saria's green cheeks. "Yes, yes, Jonah, 1,000 times yes." He pulled her close and kissed her, and they held each other on the half-finished roof as the sun set over their valley. When they finally pulled apart, Saria was smiling through her tears. "I have nothing to offer you as a bonding gift," she said. "No ring or token." "You offer me yourself," Jonah replied. "That is gift enough." "Then I should make you something," Saria insisted. "Among orcs, the bonded pair exchange crafted items that represent their commitment. I am a passable smith. I could forge you something." "And I will carve you something," Jonah said. "We will make our own traditions, blending your people's ways with mine." Over the next weeks, as they finished the cabin and began to settle in, they each worked on their secret gifts. Jonah spent his evenings carefully carving a wooden pendant from a piece of dark oak, inlaying it with patterns that incorporated both human and orcish symbols of love and eternity. Saria used a small portable forge to craft a ring from silver ore she had found in the mountains, marking it with runes that spelled out a vow of eternal partnership in the old orcish tongue. When the cabin was finally complete and they had settled into their new home, they chose a clear autumn evening for their ceremony. They had no witnesses except the stars and the forest, but that felt appropriate somehow. This was their moment, private and sacred. They stood together by the hearth Jonah had built, the fire crackling warmly behind them. Saria wore a dress she had sewn from soft leather, dyed deep green to match her skin. Jonah wore his best clothes, cleaned and mended for the occasion. "I, Jonah Nichols, take you, Saria Pyre, as my wife and life companion," Jonah said, his voice steady and clear. "I promise to stand beside you in joy and hardship, to honor your strength and cherish your gentleness, to build a life with you that spans both our people's traditions. My heart, my home, and my future are yours." He placed the carved pendant around her neck, and Saria touched it with reverent fingers, studying the intricate patterns. "It is beautiful," she whispered. Then she took his hand and spoke her own vows. "I, Saria Pyre, take you, Jonah Nichols, as my husband and life bond. I promise to stand with you against all who would divide us, to honor your courage and cherish your kindness, to build a life worthy of the love we share. My strength, my loyalty, and my heart are yours for all my days." She slipped the silver ring onto his finger, and Jonah held it up to catch the firelight, seeing the delicate orcish runes that marked it. "By our own authority, and in defiance of all who would forbid it, I declare us married and bonded," Jonah said, smiling. "May we have many happy years together in this place we have made." They sealed their vows with a kiss, and then they celebrated with a simple feast. They had prepared roasted venison, fresh bread, wild berries sweetened with honey. They ate and laughed and made love by the fire, two people who had found each other against all odds and chosen to build a life together. The months that followed were among the happiest of both their lives. They settled fully into their valley home, establishing routines and rhythms that suited them both. Jonah tended the garden and hunted, while Saria built her forge and began crafting tools and weapons they could trade with any brave enough to venture into the deep wilderness. They worked together on improving the cabin, adding a loft and a larger storage area. Winter came again, their first full winter in the new valley, and they weathered it together in comfort and companionship. They told each other stories of their pasts, taught each other skills from their respective cultures, and dreamed of the future. "You think we will always be alone?" Saria asked one snowy evening as they sat together by the fire. "Or do you think others might find us, others who reject the divisions between our peoples?" "I do not know," Jonah admitted, "but I think we have proven that such love is possible. Perhaps we are the first, but we need not be the last." "I would like that," Saria said softly. "I would like to think that someday humans and orcs might live together in peace, that our children—" She stopped abruptly, color rising in her cheeks. Jonah pulled her closer. "Our children? It is likely impossible," Saria said quickly. "I do not even know if humans and orcs can create offspring together, but sometimes I dream of it, of a child with your eyes and my strength, raised to value both our people's ways." "I dream of that too," Jonah confessed, "though like you, I do not know if it is possible. But perhaps possibility is less important than the wanting itself." Spring arrived with a sudden warmth, melting the snow and filling their valley with the sound of running water and birdsong. They worked together to expand the garden, planting seeds Jonah had carefully preserved from his previous home. Saria completed her forge and began crafting in earnest, her skills returning quickly. One afternoon, as they worked side by side in the garden, they heard the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Both tensed, reaching instinctively for weapons, but the rider who emerged from the tree line was alone and moved without the stealth of an attacker. It was the father of the little girl Saria had saved, and he was leading a pack horse loaded with supplies. "I come in peace," he called out, hands raised to show he was unarmed. "I bring trade goods and news." Jonah and Saria exchanged glances, then approached cautiously. The man dismounted and offered a tentative smile. "I am Derek Halstrom. I do not know if you remember me, but you saved my family last summer." "I remember," Saria said. "Is your daughter well?" "She is thriving," Derek said warmly, "and she asked me to bring you this." He produced a carefully wrapped package from his saddlebag. Inside was a beautifully carved wooden figure of an orc and a human standing together, clearly made by skilled adult hands. She described what she wanted, and I spent the winter carving it. Saria took the figure with trembling hands, clearly moved beyond words. "There is more," Derek continued. "Word of what you two have done has spread. The story of the orc woman and the human man who chose love over war, who saved lives and rejected their people's hatred. Some call it foolish, but others, especially among the younger generation, call it brave and hopeful. We seek no recognition, Jonah said carefully. We simply want to live in peace. I understand, Derek said, but I wanted you to know that you are not as alone as you might think. There are humans who would trade with you, who would welcome contact with an orc who has shown such honor. And I have heard rumors that some orcs speak of Saria Pyre as a legend, one who had the courage to follow her conscience. That seems unlikely, Saria said skeptically. Perhaps, Derek allowed, but the world is changing slowly. The war still rages, but there are voices on both sides calling for peace. Your story gives them hope. He stayed for several hours, sharing news and trading goods for some of Saria's metalwork, which he praised enthusiastically. When he finally left, promising to return in a few months with more trade goods, Jonah and Saria stood together watching him ride away. "You think he is right?" Saria asked. "That we have made a difference?" "I think we have made a difference for ourselves," Jonah replied. "Whether it matters to anyone else is beyond our control. But if our story gives others courage to follow their hearts, then I suppose that is a good thing." "I never wanted to be a legend," Saria said, but she was smiling slightly. "Too late now," Jonah teased. "You are Saria Pyre, the orc who saved human children and married a human man. That is the stuff of legends, whether you like it or not." She swatted his arm playfully, and they returned to their work, comfortable in the life they had built. More visitors came over the following months, always carefully and always cautiously. Some brought trade goods, others brought news. A few brought questions, asking how human and orc could truly love each other, seeking advice for their own forbidden relationships. Jonah and Saria welcomed them all, offering what wisdom they had gained through their own struggles. Their valley became a quiet refuge, a place where those tired of war could find respite and acceptance. They never sought to build a community or establish any formal arrangement, but word spread that the valley was a safe place, neutral ground where human and orc could meet without violence. Years passed in this manner, seasons cycling through their regular progressions. The cabin grew and changed as Jonah and Saria added to it, incorporating new ideas and improvements. The garden flourished, the forge produced increasingly fine work, and their reputation as the couple who bridged two worlds continued to grow. On a warm summer evening, 5 years after they had first met, Jonah and Saria sat together on the porch they had added to the cabin. They watched the sun set over the valley, comfortable in companionable silence. "You ever regret it?" Jonah asked, the question one he had never dared voice before. "Giving up your people, your culture, for this life with me?" Saria turned to look at him with those striking amber eyes that had captured his attention so long ago. "Never, not once. You gave me something my own people could not, acceptance for who I truly am. And more than that, you gave me love without condition or expectation. How could I regret that?" "I gave you a hard life," Jonah pointed out. "Danger and isolation and constant wariness." "You gave me purpose and belonging," Saria countered. "You gave me a partner who sees me as an equal. You built this home with me, shared every burden and every joy. Jonah, you gave me everything that matters." He pulled her close, and they sat together as the stars emerged one by one, marking the sky with points of light. In the distance, an owl called, and somewhere a stream burbled over rocks. The world continued its endless turning. Wars raged and peaces were made. Peoples clashed and reconciled, but here in this valley, two souls had found harmony. "I love you," Jonah said simply, "now and always." "And I love you," Saria replied. "My husband, my partner, my home." They went inside together as true night fell, closing the door on the darkness and stepping into the warm glow of their hearth. By that fire, they had first come together, she wounded and desperate, he offering shelter without expectation. By that hearth, she had let her cloak fall, revealing not just her injuries but her vulnerability, her desperate need for kindness in a world that had shown her only hostility. And he, the quiet man who had seen too much violence and sought only peace, had looked past her green skin and tusks and weapons, had looked only at her eyes and seen a person in need. That single moment of recognition, of seeing each other as individuals rather than representatives of warring peoples, had set them on this path. Now, years later, they understood that the choice they had made was not just for themselves. Every visitor who came to their valley, every story told of the orc and the human who loved each other, planted seeds of possibility. The world might not change in their lifetime, might not even change in the lifetimes of their children if they were blessed enough to have any. But change began with individual choices, with brave souls who refused to accept the divisions they were born into. They had chosen love over hate, connection over isolation, hope over despair. And in doing so, they had created a life richer and more meaningful than either had imagined possible. As they settled in for the night, wrapped in each other's arms before the crackling fire, both knew that this was exactly where they were meant to be. The journey had been difficult and the costs high, but the destination was worth every sacrifice. They had found home not in a place but in each other, and that home would endure through whatever challenges the future might bring. Together they were stronger than apart, united by bonds that transcended the artificial divisions of species and clan. This was their happily ever after, hard-won and dearly cherished, and it would remain a testament to the power of love to overcome even the deepest of prejudices. In their valley, by their hearth, they had proven that peace between enemies was not just possible but beautiful, that two people from warring worlds could build something precious together. And so they lived, day by day and year by year, in the home they had made and the love they had chosen, content in the knowledge that they had found something rare and precious: true partnership, genuine acceptance, and a love that would last all their days.